because she wouldn't submit to the ways that my dad was trying to force her to. And so in order to silence her, they just put her in a psychiatric hospital.
They go to extremes to keep this quiet, don't they?
Definitely. Definitely. So when I ran away from home and lived with a woman that I knew, I ended up meeting a man and got married to him. And we had a son together.
Okay.
And moved from Washington to Texas because he had family that lived in Texas. And I was still involved in drugs very heavily, still in contact with my dad because he was the one who kept my addiction going. I was involved in satanic occults and covens, and he actually communicated with the covens in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and so I would go to them for my drugs.
Now let me understand this. Did they actually communicate with other people, your dad in Texas here, where they would come and find you and keep you caught up in this lifestyle?
Yes, yes,
They
definitely.
go to that much trouble to do that?
They sure did. They would make anonymous phone calls. Sometimes someone would show up at my door and just remind me that this is what my life is supposed to be and that there's no way out of the satanic, because I was dedicated to Satan as a child, and I started believing that.
So what did you went back to Washington or something? What did you do? How did
Yes, after I lived here and I had a son about a year and a half old, and my husband and I got divorced. I tried to take care of my son by getting a part-time job to cover up my lifestyle, and I lived in the front seat of my car and the back seat was my son's. And it didn't take long before the authorities caught up with me, and I lost total custody of my son without visitation. And so my husband took my son and moved to California, and I was left on the streets of Dallas-Fort Worth depending on the people in the occult and doing the only thing I knew to survive. I went into prostitution.
When you're on the streets, you survive any way you can. Prostitution, whatever it takes, especially when you're hooked on drugs to keep that high going, don't you?
Yes, yes.
Tough lifestyle.
It was.
But you ended up losing your son?
Yes, I ended up losing my son and got remarried and had a daughter, and we moved to Washington State.
Okay.
And my sisters and my mom lived there, and my husband and I, shortly after we moved to Washington, got divorced, and I kept custody of my daughter because I moved in with my sister at that time. And shortly after I moved in with her, I remember one night a black figure came to the end of my bed and shook my bed, and I woke up at first thinking it was a dream, and when I sat up, he said it was time. And I said, I don't understand, it's time for what? And he said, it is time now to pass what your grandmother has passed on to you and has instilled in your life onto your daughter. My daughter was 2 years old at that time. And I had realized 2 days after that my grandmother had passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so the enemy, his plan was to continue that vicious cycle in our family, and since she was gone, and it fell upon me now to pass it on to my children. And when I realized what was expected of me, I had never understood the depth of it until that night. And I thought, there is no way that the enemy is going to get my daughter. I had already lost my son. My life was completely in shambles. And my daughter was not going to be led into this lifestyle. And I thought the only way to keep her from this was to take my life. And she could get caught up in the welfare system, go into a foster family, be adopted, but she would have a better chance than with me.
So suicide was your answer?
Yes. And I was completely convinced at that point that there was no way out. And I believed the lies of the enemy.
Oh, he's got some lies, doesn't he?
Yes, yes. And as I laid there in the front seat of my car, I made arrangements for my daughter. And I sat in the front seat of my car, went and parked in a vacant parking lot. I had a razor blade next to me ready to take my life. And as I sat there and cried, I leaned to the seat of my car back, and my arms fell to the side, and I felt something on the side of my seat in between my console. And I picked it up, and it was a small Gideon New Testament Bible.
The one that the Gideons give away everywhere?
Yes, yes. I don't know how it got there. That's my first question when I get to heaven, is who put that Bible there, but it saved my life. That car was actually obtained through a drug deal. I had owned that car for about 2 years. And I knew it inside and out, and I had never seen that Bible in my entire life.
It wasn't there before.
It wasn't there before.
But God put it there.
Yes, He did. And He knew right where I was at that very moment. And as I sat there and worked through the tears and kind of went through the Bible, and I couldn't understand it very well. And when I turned to the back, there was a sinner's prayer. And I could understand that.
You knew you were a sinner.
I could understand that I was a sinner, and I said the sinner's prayer and gave my life to Jesus Christ in the front seat of my car that night.
How powerful. We're going to go to our praise and worship. When we come back, we're going to talk about the plan that God set for you. The devil had a plan, but God intervened, and now it's His plan. We'll be right back after the praise and worship.